Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you an Arcane Archer Fighter multi-class with the Swarmkeeper Ranger in Baldur's Gate 3. This was a requested build and it's actually pretty powerful, so I'll be breaking down all of that in this video. Now I'd recommend starting with the fighter, getting Constitution saving throw proficiency as well as extra health at the start of the game is also really nice. Now our fighting style, I would actually recommend taking the archery for the +2 to range attacks, since we will primarily be doing range attacks. Although I do like the +1 armor class from defense, I think that this one works best. Now, we do have to use a stat spread that's a little multi-attribute dependent. However, a stat spread of this can work very well. That is 16 dexterity, 14 constitution, 16 intelligence, and 12 wisdom. Intelligence is important for the arcane shots, so we can land our banishing arrow, which is one of the most powerful abilities in Baldur's Gate 3. And we can dump our strength. However, if you want to use the Titan string bow, I'd recommend dumping that and then using a strength potion or the Club of Hill Giant strength in your offhand. This will give us a very powerful ability to not only take out enemies with our banishing arrow, but also land our shots with the dexterity and have a good armor class and initiative so that we go first. Level 2 is the ever powerful action surge. So that's an extra action. It's extremely useful, obviously. Level 3 gives us our arcane archer here. Now, I would recommend for our very first spell to always grab Banishing Arrow. This can banish a target for 2 turns, which is really good. The reason this is so effective is because whenever you are attacking targets, and let's say the action economy is not in your favor, you're likely to get worn out and take more damage. But if you banish some attackers, like even mages with this, you can reduce the amount of counter spells that you're suffering from, the amount of fireballs you take, and things like that, which is obviously really good. Now, I also think it's good to grab the targeting seeking arrow here, because this is almost like a magic missile, guaranteeing that we land our shots, and also setting up fairy fire for advantage on the next attack. And if you have a rogue, that means they can get their sneak attacks off. The shadow arrow is also quite nice because it makes the target blinded for 2 turns. I also somewhat like the piercing arrow. Now, arrow of many targets is obviously much better, but you can set up, if let's say you have the bow of the banshee, you can apply frightened on multiple targets by using this, and every time that we buff up our arcane acuity, we can actually land this much more frequently. So this can be good, although I do personally prefer the arrow of many targets. The bursting arrow is another nice shot, and beguiling arrow can sometimes have its uses, but we're going to go with the shadow arrow, and the seeking arrow, we'll take one later on. The cantrip guidance is always a nice one to have, and we'll go with that there. This is also the 5e fighter subclass combined by Super Dagnoth, so you can check it out if you want to try out the Echo Knight, which I have a build for. Level 4 gives us our first feat. Now, I personally like to take Sharpshooter. There is one little thing though. This doesn't actually apply to our arcane shots, which would obviously make it quite overpowered. This gives a -5 to attack rolls with +10 to our damage. The nice thing is though, if you're using arrow of many targets, it halves the damage on every subsequent target that it hits. But if you have the +10 from Sharpshooter, it doesn't actually half that. So that +10 is added flat to every target. So if you're going to use arrow of many targets, Sharpshooter is great. If not, ability score improvement on your dexterity. And if you like crossbows, crossbow expert's nice too for the close range attacks, but we're going to grab the Sharpshooter there just because the extra damage is nice. We're not always going to be using our arcane shots, and most times you're going to just be shooting with different types of attacks. Level 5 gives us our extra attack. Really nice. Now at this point, I'd actually recommend that we can grab the extra feed here if you want to take that extra feed, but we can also throw in the ranger here, and we're going to add the favorite enemy. Now, the bounty hunter is likely the best choice to give our ensnaring shot the ability to crowd control, but we also have other crowd control options. Wasteland Wanderer Fire is likely going to be the most effective as fire damage is very plentiful, and poison damage is also quite common, but I think that fire just has the edge over it. Level 2 gives us our fighting style, and again, we can now take our defense here for +1 to our armor class, and I would recommend grabbing Hunter's Mark as a concentration, and Ensnaring Strike seems to have the benefit to boost it up, but Fog Cloud is also kind of nice as a way to hide out in combat. Now, once we get to level 3, this is when we can take our Swarmkeeper subclass, which gives us the Gathered Swarm. Mage Hand, which is actually very underrated. You can use Mage Hand to you can do a free action drop health potion and then use Mage Hand to throw it. So that's an easy 40 health without even using your own action. We also get Fairy Fire and the Gathered Swarm. Now, I think the Flurry of Moths ends up being best. It gives you extra psychic damage. But if you're going to use things like the Gloves of the Belligerent Skies, then this can give you the Jellyfish can give you the lightning damage, which will set that up. Personally, I prefer the Flurry of Moths. It also looks pretty cool. It's kind of personal preference there, but the Moths I would give the preference to. Now for our next leveled spell, Fog Cloud or Long Strider if you don't have someone else on the party that has it. It's a free spell to cast on everybody. And then level 4, I would actually, at this point, recommend, since we're going to get a feat either way, I'd recommend going with a fighter to continue on. This will give us the ability to take, again, if you wanted to use crossbows, you could take the crossbow expert feat, which will allow you to attack at close range without disadvantage. And an ability score improvement on your dexterity is always a good choice, but I'm going to go with the crossbow expert just because it has some pretty cool options if you want to not use a bow. And this is the reason we're going to go up to level 7 in the fighters, because you get the magical arrow, which allows your arrows to overcome resistances, which is pretty good boost to its damage, and the curving shot, which actually kind of glitches out and works kind of funny. So when you miss a shot with a ranged attack, you can use a bonus action to attack the next closest target with the same attack. Now, if we set up, I'll be showing you something in the gear section, how we can create ice surfaces when we shoot. This will actually stretch out the ice surface and make it really large, which is actually pretty crazy. And we get to take another arcane shot, which is this one I recommend. Taking the piercing arrow, which can give us that extra, if you use different things like the bow of the banshee, you can apply it multiple fear on multiple targets. Now, at this point, there's a couple ways. You can go back to the ranger. This will give us another feat here. Similar, I guess, the fighter will give us that extra feat. But with this, we get the web spell. Now, I've tested a few different ways that we can build around this. And I actually like another weird multi-class with the druid, because this can give us another arrow attack, which is pretty nice. So with this, you get to grab a couple more cantrips here, like resistance and thorn whip being an okay choice. Even produce flame, because this can give you a light in your hands. And then for the spells, healing word can be nice to be able to pick up down allies, and then either long strider or to create or destroy water if you get teammates that could benefit from this. But the level 2 into this gives us our starry form. And why is that nice? Well, with the starry form, this will give us the ability to either do a dragon breath attack or go with a luminous arrow attack. So further stacking up more arrows, kind of cool. And I think that this ends up working well, as it's a multi-class that's going to utilize the wisdom stat a little bit here. So you get the starry form. You can also prepare an extra spell here with speak with animals if you don't have the potions often, or long strider if your team doesn't have it. And either thunder wave is another nice spell. But with this, we have 2 special forms that we have. So then you can go right ahead, turn into your archer form, and boom, you now have the ravens, or you have the moths and the starlight around your character, which fits thematically. Also, this outfit is from the Ethereal Threads mod. As for the gear that we're going to be rolling with, there's actually a lot of synergies here. Now, one of the best is the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. You can also use the Fire Acuity hat if you want to put fire damage with the Helldust gloves. However, this, with an arrow many targets, can give us a +10 to our arcane shots. So then you can go ahead with your Banishing Arrow and it's going to have a +10, basically ensuring that you you get rid of one target, which is actually really good. Again, turning the action economy. Now, the Cloak of Protection's a good choice, although you could go with the Deathstalker Mantle, or if you want to hide, use the Shade Slayer Cloak. But I think if you're the Dark Urge, the Deathstalker Mantle is the best, because you can turn invisible for 2 turns. Now, we also get the Ballast Armor here, which will make targets vulnerable to piercing damage at close range unless they're immune. But if they're immune to it, it actually still makes them vulnerable, and it gives a +2 to initiative so that we ensure that we go first. I also like the Luminous Gloves, because we can stack Radiating Orbs by using our Luminous Arrow here. It only does a 1d8 of damage, but a bonus action to apply Radiating Orbs can be really nice too. There's actually a lot of good choices here. If you use the Jellyfish Gloves, or the Jellyfish Swarm, you can use the Gloves of the Bliggering Skies to apply Reverberation on the enemy. You could also dump Dex and use the Gloves of Dexterity if you wanted to. If you're using an offhand crossbow, the Gloves of the Balanced Hand can boost up the offhand attacks, but again, we got our Luminous Arrow, so it's probably better to do that. The Helldust Gloves, as mentioned, gives us a bonus to our spell save DC for our arcane shots, but also fire damage on our attacks, which can be nice to boost up our overall damage. If you want to maximize damage, Helldust Gloves or Justiciar's Gloves with the necrotic damage will be the best. But if you want to debuff the enemy, the Luminous Gloves would be the best choice. Now, we also got the Evasive Shoes there, but you can roll with the Boots of Stormy Clamor as well if you want to further stack up Reverberation on the enemy, which is a great status to have. I personally like Fowler Louvre, early game weapon. It has the Fowler Louvre Melody, which will apply extra thunder damage on the targets that get hit with that. And on top of all that, we're not going to be using our melee attacks as much, so it's better to have a stat stick like that. You could also grab the Creation's Echo, which is a really nice quarterstaff, since we're not going to be using our weapon, because whenever the weir deals acid, fire, lightning, radiant, or necrotic damage, it becomes resistant to that damage type for 2 turns. So yeah, this can be pretty good if you want to be focused more on a defensive aspect, because we can deal a lot of different types of elemental damage, and especially like we got the fire damage and things like that. So between Fowler Louvre for more offensive focus and also debuffing, or the Creation's Echo if you really want to focus on being more supportive. And we also got the Viconia's Walking Fortress here, which is just a good shield, or you can use any really shield that has a +3, or any personal preference there for shields. And we also have the Gaunter Mail here, but I took Crossbow Expert. This would be the best, if one of the best, the Bow of the Banshee too, and also going with the Titan String Bow if you're going to use the Strength Potions, not required, personal preference at this point. The Dead Shot's also nice for the increased critical hit chance, which is great. But personally, I really like the Hellfire Hand Crossbow. Since we're going to have a bit of stealth, we can actually utilize this, and then also have the Deathstalker Mantle if you're the Dark Urge, because we'll turn invisible after taking out a target, which will then burn the target. We have fire on our attacks as well. And to kind of make things even crazier, if you wanted to, you can use the Snowburst Ring here, which will create ice surfaces, At this point, we'd probably want to remove the Helldust gloves and either swap for the dark just to see air gauntlets there, because then they'll do necrotic damage and won't get rid of our ice surfaces. And the way that we'll be showing out or doing ice surfaces is as followed. You need a target with the Drake Throat Glaive here, and this comes with a special attack with the, or special option with the Draconic Energy here, so elemental weapon. You can apply the cold damage, make sure that you hold out your hand crossbows first, and then you will have it on your bow here. So you see we got the necrotic and cold damage on a ranged attack. And this cold damage will apply the ice surfaces from the Snowburst ring, which is pretty crazy. And then we also get the Eversight ring, which makes you immune to blindness, which is extremely useful. If you don't have this ring, the Killer Sweetheart's nice. The Ring of Protection for better armor class, the Ring of Regeneration to keep you alive longer. Even the Shade Slayer or Cloaked Ring if you want to be focused on kind of hiding out in shadows. But I think that getting the ability to see in darkness is nice because then we can shoot a arrow of darkness, and that gives us a little camp out spot that we can hide. All right, so for our first turn of combat, it's ideal to set up some type of crowd control. So an arrow of darkness at a target will give us the ability to hide out there. And then you can use the Flurry of Moths to either blind the target, teleport yourself there, or do the Flurry of Moth attack, do a little extra psychic damage, which is nice. And then we can go up right close to them, because then we're going to have the advantage on our attacks, because we can see in darkness, they can't. And what's even better about that is then when we use an arrow of many targets, we can then hit them with a high chance of success, and then it's going to bounce around to other targets. And boom, you see there, we got ice surfaces set up in multiple different locations, which are great. So there's ice surface, you can see the darkness ice, it kind of combines both into the same thing. And then, yeah, we were able to knock a target prone. We want to ideally do it on the enemy's turn, because that means that they won't be able to attack, as getting knocked prone ends your turn. Now, we also want to take out high priority targets, like that's one right there. So that's when we got our arrow of any target. So Arcane Acuity is already at a +10, so this is nice. It doesn't really show us our spell save DC, but you can see there the Ranger's one is +10, the Druid one is +10. So that means that our shots are more likely to land. So then we can use the Banishing Arrow there. We have high chance of hitting and slipping too. I should have used the, I forgot to mention that the there's boots here that will prevent that with the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. I typically equip those because, yeah, I had to move around to hit that shot and I slipped on the ice. We also look really cool while invisible and with the moths and stars around our character. All right, so let's try that again. We're going to use the arrow of many targets on this target here as our high priority one, 99% hit chance. And the nice thing about arrow many targets, we got a crit off on them, and that also gave crit damage to our ice bonus damage and to our necrotic bonus damage. And the extra nice thing about that is the first shot, if it is a critical hit with arrow many targets, the rest of them will be. That's how we're able to wipe out that many targets. Now, the piercing shot here, we can actually hit, unfortunately, we'll hit Minsk too, but you can hit multiple targets with this, so we may as well do that shot there because it's going to add all of our damage riders to those, which is nice. We were able to take out one target, and that keeps us with our one action there. Now, again, one of the most effective things is setting up our crowd control, so that's why we like the arrow of many targets, because this will spread our ice surfaces to many different targets. So we'll go ahead with that there. And then you can also use the Flurry of Moths attack if you want to, or blind the targets. That was enough to take out an extra target and apply reverberation on them. Reverberation can also knock enemies prone, which is also very nice. And at this point, we should look for the highest priority target, since we have that +10 to our Arcane Acuity again, and then use our Banishing Shot. I may just use it on this target here. I'll use it on them. Banishing Shot, 75% hit chance, and hopefully we'll banish them. Boom, it banished them. Perfect. It actually took them out. But yeah, if you banish a high priority target, that just means that it's less likely for them to damage your team. And then we got our Luminous Arrow here, which we can attack with, and this will, that was enough to take out the target there. Great, since it gave us extra damage right on top of that. And then we also have Action Surge, which is a very powerful ability from the fighter. So then we can go ahead here, finding the next target. And if you have a hard time finding a target, that's what arrow many targets is for. So 84% hit chance, boom. It actually was no target near there. We banished one of them still, all the other targets are right there. And another nice thing is, if you want, you can use some of the other arrows too, like creating an acid surface here to give us multiple different types of damage. Boom. Creating an acid surface to reduce our armor class. We miss them either way. And it's funny because that target is banished, but they have 0 health and 3 turns of reverberation on them, so it's funny. And if you can avoid moving, if you don't have those boots on to prevent the slip, that's going to be ideal. Now, we do have a lot of different shots, like the Shadow Arrow can blind a target, and we can also set up another blind with our the Swarm arrows. But if you want to make sure that you're landing your shots, this one here is going to be the ideal one, because that's going to also apply Fairy Fire. We knock the target prone from reverberation, which is hilarious. And I guess just to show the concentration, which will boost up the damage that we apply on the target. Hunter's Mark is really nice, although you can't use your Luminous Arrow if you also use that on the same turn. We'll just do a regular arrow shot there, and the extra damage was applied. Boom, that's nice. We just had to wait for that banished target to return. That's weird because they have 0 health and they're still attacking. I guess that's just something that happens. And it's Schrodinger's Fist because they are both alive and dead at the same time. So that can cause some issues. We'll just attack them there and finally finish them off. So yeah, getting the Arcane Shots alongside the Swarmkeeper bonus damage and also the blind, and then also on top of that the Luminous Arrow from the Star Druid makes for a pretty interesting build because you have so many different things that you can do, and you can apply radiant damage, you can apply statuses with this. There's a lot of customization and variability with this build. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hit the subscribe button below if you haven't already, and I hope you have a great day.